this series is about B2B sales, or let's call that direct sales, meaning that we target an individual inside of each company that we want to acquire as clients, or acquire them as suppliers or partners, depending on what your pipeline, the nature of your pipeline. But in each case, we target a potential decision maker, and we bring a sales value proposition to them. So the sales value proposition is one component of several components that create your sales message, okay? And the big lesson there is to distinguish between marketing message and sales message, because marketing messages are for the masses. It's like broadcasting. A marketing message can get lost in noise. So if you're from the marketing field, you know what noise is. It means so many marketing messages that it all becomes one big room with hundreds of people speaking at the same time. So you can't really hear what anyone is saying. Your sales message is not that. In a B2B direct sales process, it is a message, it's language between two people speaking to each other, like two people speaking with each other. So you never sound like a television commercial, if you're speaking directly to another person, or you would pretty much seem like a freak if you were doing that. So the sales message is made of several components, and we discussed that last time. So I think I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat here. So you probably remember that. I'm always available if anyone wants a review of that, if you missed it. Okay, so what is left in our series, this is the second part of a 3-part series, are the bullets that you see here in darker gray or in black. Today we are going to talk about the primary components of the sales process, and we'll end by talking about the importance of documentation and the importance of KPIs. We'll unpack that when we get there. The first thing we're going to look at is this concept of sales process. Okay, so what does sales process mean? Maybe it's a good time just to get an impression from you guys of, when you hear sales process, what does that bring to mind? How would you describe it or define it? That's one of those times when I'm expecting an answer and I'm not going to move until I get it. So if someone wants to share their definition of sales process, or what you think it is.
Can I go, Phil?
Yeah, please, of course.
Okay, so a sales process is basically, in my view, a set of steps and decisions that you have to make for your team and your startup, which comprise the steps to gathering your clients, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, that's a very good answer. Sometimes it's easy to finish understanding what sales process means by talking about the opposite. What is the opposite of sales process? So we might say chaos. Chaos is the opposite of sales process, but not especially a bad chaos, because chaos in this case is describing perhaps an opportunistic approach. An opportunistic approach is probably how you have all built the business, actually, until now. An opportunistic approach sounds great and feels great as long as it's working. And sometimes it's the thing that helps you to procrastinate and delay working with a process. So procrastinate is not a positive word. It means not doing something you know you have to do, and leaving it for later and leaving it for later. So if you know you have a task you need to do, you think it's a great idea. Oh, first let me go get the box of ice cream from the freezer first, and then that will get me ready to do the process. And I'll only eat a little ice cream. So then you serve yourself some ice cream and you put the box in the freezer and you finish that ice cream and it's time to do your work. And it's like, oh, you know what? That wasn't a lot of ice cream. Let me serve myself some more ice cream first. Okay. Some more ice cream again. So that's an example of procrastination. The opposite of a sales process is this chaotic approach to acquisition of clients, many times encouraged by success in running an opportunistic sales approach. It's not a process, it's an approach. Opportunism means most of the time I have buddies and they work in other companies, right? So my buddies will buy my product. Will they buy your product? Let's say yes, they will. How many buddies do you have? Does the number of buddies that you have equal the size of your wish list, of your target list? We have that topic coming next week, the creation of your target client wish list and the process of reaching out to them. And we will learn next week the meaning of the wish list, the difference, but very quickly, the difference between wish list and just target list is that to me, the wish list means that you have put some major research and work into the creation of your target list. A target list could be 15 companies because you chose 15 companies and it's a list and you will target those companies. But the question is, are these all of the companies that fit my client definition? If I magically had a list of every company that fits my target client definition, that's what I call the wish list. You wish for it, or you can also apply a ton of research work to make sure you have as perfect and complete a list of target clients that fit your client definition. So if we bring that all back to the sales process or the topic of just running from one opportunity to the next one, the question is, if your wish list has 250 companies, and that's all there is in the world in terms of companies that fit your client definition, do you actually have a buddy in each one of those companies? If you do, well, then you're in a very good position. The opportunistic approach starts to merge with an organized approach towards the market. But the truth is that most of us don't have a buddy in each one of the companies in the wish list, in the true list of clients that fit your client definition. And the buddies you do have in some of those companies, they may still not be the decision maker. So the day that you decide we need an insurance policy in addition to the opportunities that we get through our network, in addition to anything else that we have running, you may have marketing up and running, and it can produce a very nice steady stream of inbound leads. That's good. But I would encourage everyone to think about getting around to having an outbound sales process, which eliminates luck and puts things in your hands. Now, what I mean by in your hands is that if you have a process which doesn't rely on any luck, then it's going to rely on, let's call it data. What do I mean by data? If you know that if you reach out to 10 companies and you can sign one, that's data that you can then use to predict what's coming, okay? So you would love to predict what's coming in terms of the number of clients that you sign. With the data, you would be able to predict that, but it also implies that you would need to begin to work at a steady rate. So if you get 1 out of 10 signed, then if anything's going to be predictable, then you probably need to reach out to 10 companies per week, every week, right? In order to really know what to expect. If you fall below 10, then your entire forecast needs to be revised. And that assumes that you fell below 10 just this week, but then every week from here on will also be predictable. So the sales process is precisely that. an organized approach that also implies a steady rate of work. And then it becomes predictable by extracting the data that you already have, perhaps conversion figures, or the data you will begin to have by beginning to work steady and extracting the data out of it. So that's a big introduction, because this is a big deal, the sales process. Okay, so unless there are any further comments or questions, I'll move on. Okay, the first thing I'll mention is that in order to know that it's time to launch a sales effort, and you believe that sales effort needs to be organized, then check for the following 4 components, 4 pillars. Imagine you're building a house and it is somehow not laying on the ground, it's up in the air. Then the safest way to build it would be on 4 pillars. Maybe 3 pillars is okay if your house is triangular. 2 pillars begins to be risky, and 1 pillar is more risky, whether the house will be able to just exist on that pillar. But most houses are square and they have 4 corners. So let's think about the 4 cornerstones, or the 4 pillars of your sales process. If you have all these 4 things covered, meaning that you've put some thought into them and you've created the first version of these pillars, then you know you've got the minimum requirement to launch a sales effort. Okay, so first component is your sales value proposition converted into a statement, a sales value proposition statement. So the thing to say here, and this might remind you of the last segment that we had, it's very important for you as the founder of your company to be the one that understands your client, that understands the things that are difficult to do for them, the things that are annoying, the things that are just nice to have by your client. And it's quite possible that you will be the only person in your company that will ever truly understand your client as well as you do. Many times you're coming from that industry, you were frustrated by something, and then you decided, let me create the solution for that frustrating thing. And it's just natural to you to know what the pain is that your client experiences. Sometimes we create a product because we think the product is going to be really cool, and our focus is product focused, contrasting it to value focused. What is value focused? It means you don't have a product today. You realize a certain need or pain that's out there, and then you begin to pattern the product completely toward that value. That would actually be the ideal scenario, because then you know you have a market. Many of us don't start that way. Many of us start building our tool, start building our product for love of the product. If you have gotten to the point in your company where everything you've done is product focused, it doesn't mean it's not a market fit. Okay, the risk is that it's not a market fit. It's just a Frankenstein that you created and it's beautiful to you, but it has no market fit, like Frankenstein had no market fit. Probably that's not the case for any of you, okay? But it doesn't mean that maybe your company isn't product focused. The goal for you is simply that your sales process is not product focused, but rather, if you have an existing product, it was made because someone thought it would be beautiful to make the product. You still have plenty of opportunity to go out and interview. You may have existing clients, so the product had a market fit. You can interview those existing clients by asking them, hey, what's really in it for you here? What's the real value that you get out of our product? And that's one way to get the answer as to what is the value. Or if you are still needing to acquire your first clients, there's nothing wrong with setting the expectation with your potential clients that you would like to get their feedback. You're reaching out to them to get their feedback. So in other words, it's never too early to reach out to your wish list of clients to ask them for their help in getting feedback with the idea that you have or the prototype product that you have. And you could learn the value at that point as well, even before you acquire a client. As long as you ask the questions, what pains do you have and what value do you see in the project that I'm working on, and so on. Okay, so very important to be coming from an angle where you really know how your clients feel and the pains that they have. Okay, so imagine you launch a sales process and you don't have this covered. It's like a house that's missing a major part of the support, and it could just totally collapse. Okay, next part is to have a definition of the kind of client that you need, and the person inside of those organizations who would be willing to hear your message. So the decision maker. I use this definition loosely because sometimes the decision maker is just the person who has the budget and the money and the signature power. Okay, I'm using the word decision maker loosely here as the highest ranking officer for your relevant topic matter. So we all know that a director of marketing may not be the person who can sign a contract and release the money. Okay, traditionally that would be the decision maker, but we're never going to launch a sales process by reaching out to just the person in charge of budget. So there are words that are used out there such as influencers and users and decision makers. I think of things just a little more simply. I figure the person who's in charge of the department, which is the relevant topic matter for me, they will get the job done if they really need the solution. Okay, and at later stages we can investigate what does the decision process look like in that person's company, and then we ask what is the best role we can play, basically, in helping that decision process to succeed. Okay, so I have kind of a cynical view of that, or a simplified view of that particular thing. So you decide, which job role do I need to be reaching out to? Which job role do I need to be pressuring at the company to pay attention to me and to eventually adopt my product? And but the first part of this, the client definition, the definition of the kinds of clients that you want to acquire, that is important. It's a very important part of coming to that space we want to be in, where we do not have just an opportunistic approach to the market. So opportunistic, again, it's just companies that are in your network. So these companies could be a terrible fit, but because they're in your network, they acquire your product, and then maybe they are dissatisfied with your product. Okay, maybe there's bad retention with those companies that come in from your network, because perhaps those companies would not fit a definition of the kind of client that you should be working with. It was actually just a place where you had a connection. So to optimize the situation, super important to have a definition of the kind of client that you want to acquire before you launch your sales effort. So it's a pillar of the sales process. So the wish list, which we will talk about in a week, it feeds directly off of the definition of the kind of client that you should be having. Your wish list is the list of companies that you would reach out to try to acquire the moment that you launch an outbound organized sales process. It's to the extreme that if you go to a trade show and you have a stand and somebody approaches you and says, hey, I've heard you have a really cool product. Where do I sign? Then we take it to the extreme where we would first begin to ask qualification questions of that company that approaches us in a trade show and says, I've heard you have a really cool product and I would like to become your client. Where do I sign? We would ask them, okay, tell me what industry you're in. Okay. Tell me what size you are. Okay. And tell me what country you're operating in. Okay. And maybe I have a fourth question. And maybe I have a fifth question. And these are all questions that I'm using to determine, is this company inside the definition of the kind of client that I have defined that I should work with? If the answer is no, then when you reach that level of maturity and you have a sales process that you really believe in, you learn to tell people, I'm sorry, I know you're ready to sign up, but we're not working with companies like yours at the moment. You learn to say no to people who are begging to have your product. But why would you say no? Well, when you're defining the kind of client that you have, you are bringing in certain considerations, such as, is this the kind of client that is ultimately satisfied by my product? So is this the kind of client that I will retain? Is this the kind of client that would provide good feedback to me and spread good feedback in the market? Is this the kind of client where I make good margins? Guys, there are industries out there which are poor. What do I mean by poor? The airline industry, so airlines or airplane builders, they're not poor, right? They have tons of money. Don't worry about the situation now with COVID, but normally tons of money there. But the margins are tiny. The airlines have tiny, tiny margins. So you want to make money in your company, and approaching industries that are not going to be generous, they don't have a lot of budgets, they don't have big prices that they can pay, even if it's a huge industry with a lot of money, you may never make back your money with these kinds of clients, asking too much and not able to pay much for it. Okay, so in your client definition, you may decide which are the healthy industry verticals, what is the healthy size of a company where I tend to get good margins, good feedback, good retention, and you learn to say no to deals that are doomed from the start. Work relationships that are doomed from the start. So doomed means that they're destined to fail. Okay, so that's an important pillar also in the sales process. Next are your sales stages, meaning that if you are planning on launching a sales process and you've never had clients before, you will want to imagine the journey that clients will go through during the process in which you are trying to acquire them as clients. And the mirror image of that is, we think it's a process by which we are trying to acquire a client. For them, it's a due diligence process, basically. It's a process by which they are gathering information in order to take a business decision. And so business class 101, meaning the first business lesson you'll ever hear in your life, is that a good business decision is based on information. If you have perfect information, then you are making the right business decision. The challenge in business is to base your decisions on correct and complete information. The less complete your information is, the more risky your business decision is. So simply, the decision to start to work with a client. If you knew this client pays, there's no doubt about it, they pay their bills, then it's a safer business decision than signing a client where you don't really know what their record is paying invoices. So that's a simple example of business lesson 101, the first lesson you learn on the first day of business school. So that's the mirror image, meaning that for us, it's a process of acquiring the client. For them, it's a process of gathering information to know that this is going to solve my pain for sure, and I can afford this. It will pay off at the end for sure. So your potential client will go through a journey, through the sales process or through their purchasing process, okay? And the journey, think about it as a train that is going from point A to point Z, okay? And then there are all the points in between, point B, point C, point D. These are the cities where the train stops. From the origin to the terminus, there are stations where the train stops. Why does the train stop? It stops for a purpose. It doesn't stop for no purpose, okay? So those are the sales stages. There is a moment where you deliberately stop your client in a station in order to perform for some kind of purpose, in order to perform some kind of thing at that stopping point, okay? If you've never brought clients through your sales stages, then you take an educated guess of where it makes sense to stop and have a discussion or an exercise with my client. So for example, for almost everyone, your first sales stage is your research and outreach stage. That's when you identify a decision maker inside of a company and you check that the company fits your client definition and you reach out to that person. The purpose is to engage them in your first deep conversation. So we've named 2 sales stages there, the outreach and then the first profound, deeper conversation. These are stations where you're stopping your client from signing today, and you park them first to accomplish something. In a deeper conversation, your purpose would be to investigate the situation, interrogate the client to the extent where you understand, you feel you have uncovered their situation, you have uncovered any pain points that they have, and you can put forward the best solution that you can, the most complete solution that you can. You also don't want to leave money on the table. That means you failed to discover a bigger potential where you could have done more for the client and build more for the client. And the client would have been ready to say, yeah, I will take that. So that shows you where it makes sense to stop the sales process, park it, accomplish something, have a conversation, go through some kind of mental exercise or open discussion in order to get the most out of your sales effort. So you think about the stages where it makes sense to have meetings, phone calls, tests, like a proof of concept, and then you officialize it. When you think it really makes sense, this is the most efficient, the quickest, but it includes the essentials of what the journey needs to look like, then you make it official. And you treat every client the same. So that comes with a bit of a warning. Sales process is about doing the same things repetitively because it's efficient. You don't waste time thinking about, how do I treat this one individual client? And how should I reach out? Should it be with emails or phone calls? That's the kind of thing that a sales process saves you. All of this wasted time reinventing the wheel client by client. The warning I do want to give you is that sometimes you have really big and important clients. Sometimes you have smaller, less important potential clients. They all still fit within the range of your client definition, but some could make you a lot more money than others. Maybe it's just based on the size, or it could be based on another factor. So you can still treat that in an organized fashion by having tiers, for example, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. These are subgroups inside of your standard client definition. It's not always this way, but typically it's big, medium, and small. And you could have more sales stages for one tier and fewer sales stages for another one, meaning you could give one more attention than the other one. So you can still have a structural answer. If it's dangerous to treat every single client exactly the same way, you can still have a structured approach to who do I give more attention to and who do I give less attention to, and what does that mean, more or less attention. Okay, so the sales stages could be the way that you solve that more and less attention question. The next pillar are your price, your terms and conditions, and something I call your concessions. So the point of these pillars is make sure you have these things covered, then you can safely launch your sales effort. And you can build on even more complexity to your sales process, but these would be the elemental things. Price, obviously, someone's going to need to know what to pay you for your product, okay? Terms and conditions, such as, do you need a setup fee? Do you need to charge a setup fee? If you are a monthly recurring product or service, how long is the duration of the subscription? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? What are the terms for canceling? What else? So anything that comes into your terms and conditions and your price, better to think of them now. There's another word here called concessions, and it's good to think about these things now. Does anyone know what that means? Just right off the bat, what is a concession? Don't be shy if you have any kind of idea. Let's just hear back from you because I've been speaking for a long time. It's related to price, terms, and conditions. So what could concessions mean?
It is writing, it could be discounts or extra perks.
Perfect. Okay, good. Think about it. These are the things you're willing to give away. Give away when? Well, when someone protests. It's called a negotiation. When you get into negotiations, you want to have something in your pocket that you can give away. The reason I bring this up here under the components is because many times when you have a startup, for example, you become very idealistic, meaning, and that sometimes is related to the product focus. I'm going to make the best, coolest product, and then everyone's going to love it. Everyone's going to jump on it. Everyone's going to want to buy it. And then on top of that, I'm going to have awesome terms and conditions. So I have a SaaS product, let's say, and in the market where I operate, all of my competitors are always charging a setup fee. All of my competitors have this 12-month duration to their contract. I'm going to be really clever and not have any of that. No setup fee, no contract duration, and then everyone's going to just love it. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to have a super cool product and the best terms, so everyone's going to say yes. Well, that's idealistic. Out there in the real world, there are a lot of very rotten personalities that you are going to run into. What's an example of a rotten personality? So imagine that someone is trained out of habit or whatever other reason. They are trained to say no to the first price that they hear. Just no, automatically, with no rationale, with no reason, just automatically no. So here you show up idealistically with the best deal in the market, and some cynic is just trained to say, oh no, that's terrible. Well, if you're idealistic and you have the best terms in the market and that's what you offer from the start, then you don't have anything left in your pocket to give away anymore during negotiations. So if you think to yourself, my product is the one with no setup fee. My product is the one with no monthly minimum duration. my recommendation is match the tendency in the market. Have that setup fee that you never cared to charge. Have the monthly duration as opposed to cancel anytime that you never thought you needed and you never cared for it, simply so that you have something to give away in the negotiation process. And if you don't have to give it away, you even made a little more money in the setup fee. Another way of saying this is sometimes you are idealistic and you come to the market with a really cool new idea on how to bill. And maybe it's good in every way, shape, or form. But the problem with it is it's not familiar. You're giving people an intellectual problem where they think, oh, I've never seen that billing style before. You're giving them homework. You're throwing something that delays the sales process. So if you're working in an industry where there is a trend in the way that services are built, I would encourage you to match those tendencies so that they don't even need to give it a second thought. It's similar to everything they've seen before. Your price can be cheaper. That still fits within the framework. But the framework is what I'm recommending, that you don't throw something radical people haven't seen in your framework. And in the process, if you're moving down from idealistic to just traditional, you probably are building up things that case by case, if you get into conversations and negotiations with clients, then you still have that to give away. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And now look at these arrows. These pillars are actually all related to each other because there's movement here. Your sales value proposition statement, who is it for? It's for the ears of the decision maker inside of only the companies that you're defining as your target clients. What happens if you engage them with your sales value proposition? Then they're going to get on the train and take the journey through the sales stages. And what's the destination? The terminus is the destination. It's a contract that we're going to sign based on agreeable prices and terms and conditions and anything that we negotiated, that we had to give and take. Oh, I'm glad I just said that because it reminded me of something. We don't have a negotiation segment in this series, but that last box points us in that direction. What I do want to remind you of, point number one, we already discussed that there are all kinds of personalities out there that you're going to have to deal with, and some can be very cynical. It's another way of me saying that negotiation, I don't even think you write the book on it. It's just a jungle out there. It's a absolute chaos. So you want to just walk into that jungle protected, bring a machete, because you just never know what's going to happen. It's not a well-concerted dance. It is actually a chaos. So what I want to leave you with is the thought that a negotiation, we mentioned the concessions here. So a big warning, and I'm glad I didn't forget to tell you this. A negotiation isn't just giving away. That's only half of the negotiation process. Can anyone tell me what the other half is? So every time I give away, so I make my price smaller, or I give away my setup fee, or I suspend the monthly, the duration of the contract, or I bring it down from 12 months to 6 month contract duration. Giving away is only half of the process. For everything I give away, what also needs to happen? Does anyone know the answer to that?
Something in return.
Exactly. It's a give and take. So anytime someone says, lower your price, you probably want to ask them, okay, what price are you thinking of? Okay, I can give you that price, but this is what I need in return. And you tell them what you need in return. I recommend that you ask for something in return, which is painless for them. We don't want to make the sales process longer. Something painless for them. And I told you that negotiations are just a circus. I said it was a jungle, but it's also a circus. I really disrespect negotiations, basically. It's a circus because it's just symbolic sometimes, you know? So if it's just symbolic, then ask for something in return which is painless, and it's just symbolic. So things that are painless, we can make a huge list of them, but you could say, okay, and you make it sound like a big deal, like you think it's worth a lot, even though deep down inside you know it's doesn't have any value to them. It doesn't really cost them any pain or money to be a reference client, for example. But you want to make a whole background story about it, such as, okay, well, listen, maybe we can serve you at the price that you mentioned. I think what I would just need in return from you is if we could do a press release 6 months after we begin, with the right to mention you by name. We would want a quote from you, assuming that you're satisfied 6 months into the process. And we would just need you to sign that release now, that you would be willing to do that if you are satisfied. So and you would explain, yeah, because then to give you your discount, I could divert some marketing budget to fill that gap, because this would be like a marketing activity for us. So maybe that is all just BS, this thing about the marketing budget, but you would have to make it sound like it's a big deal. So it's just a ridiculous circus, negotiations, but make sure you're just not giving away. You need to say a story so that it sounds heavy, what you're willing to do, instead of just giving it away like, oh, okay, cheaper, then here you go, it's cheaper. Why? I'll answer this question for myself. Because the moment they perceive that they can ask for something and you just say, okay, well, then nothing's going to stop them from saying, oh, and also this. And then you say, okay, that too. And then that encourages them to say, oh, well, then drop also this. It will become a downward spiral because you never applied the brakes. You know what the brakes are? When you get in your car, one of the pedals are the brakes. They're the ones that bring the car to a stop. When they ask for something, you ask for something in return. Those are the brakes. It tells someone, you want to ask for the next thing, then you're going to give up another thing. And that's really the dynamics of a negotiation. They can break down and no one can be happy with each other at the end of the day, but you can't just give away and give away and give away. If you have nothing left to give, then make sure to write down this question. It basically is the question, if. What will happen if I give you this discount? And then they need to answer, if you give me this discount, we sign the deal. Okay, when would we sign the deal? So you just want to finally uncover, if I take this action, what happens and when? Please write that down. If is the question, is the hypothesis. If I do this, and the two questions are, what will happen and when? Because if you're left in a position where you're just going to give away, you need to know, what else are we going to deal with? What other barriers will come once we resolve this? So if I give you this discount, what other barriers are going to exist to prevent us from signing this deal? Okay, guys, so those are the primary components of the sales process. Solve these things and you can confidently launch your sales effort. We mentioned sales stages, right? That was one of the pillars. Here's a quick generic look at what sales stages can look like. Each of you will have different sales stages because remember, it's the answer to the question. For my business model, my educated guess is I should pause and stop my client for some kind of workshop or intellectual exercise or open discussion that will get us to the best destination. So the sales stages, generically speaking, they tend to be qualification, which is the process where we measure them to see if they're the size or the nature of the company we should be dealing with, and identifying who to speak to at that particular company and reaching out to that decision maker. So a substitute name for this stage is sometimes outreach. And then comes the first formal deep discussion with the client called the discovery meeting. You could call it the first deep conversation, whatever. The point of this stage is that in the qualification stage, you have been working to schedule this meeting. And I would never create a sales stage called discovery meeting scheduled, because the schedule is not to be trusted. The proof is in finally conducting the discovery meeting. So if it's scheduled, fine, you send a calendar invite and so on, but nothing guarantees that that meeting is going to happen. If they don't show up to your meeting, you're right back in the same spot in the qualification and outreach stage. And so I wouldn't create a stage where then I have to take it back to the previous stage, you know? It's important to have clear milestones that tell your sales team when they really are in a particular sales stage. So discovery here actually means discovery meeting held. What do I mean by demonstration? The next sales stage here, not everyone has this stage. Sometimes there's nothing to demonstrate. Sometimes your discovery meeting includes a quick demo. This points to the nature of a certain kind of sales process where there's the decision maker, so the highest ranking officer of your relevant topic matter. But then that guy might need for the end users to have a demo. And none of the end users will decide anything, but his decision will be based on, guys, how do you like it? Okay, so sometimes you have a demo completely apart, and the discovery meeting reveals that these are the people you should speak to, and the discovery meeting would also be a place where you clearly determine the next steps. Okay, I'll do a demo with these people, and then what? That's the important thing to keep in mind. So the demonstration stage here would be demonstration accomplished or demonstration held. And in the rules that you build in your sales process, the milestone that you would need to communicate to your sales team is maybe you only mark it as demonstration held after the follow-up meeting with the decision maker is held. So demo for the users and then follow-up meeting with the decision maker again. So that whole package would include demo and follow-up meeting. 2 meetings actually. When that phase is held, then you can mark it as demonstration. Same thing with proposal. It's proposal sent. Proof of concept, again, not in everyone's sales stages. Maybe the proposal is just what you pay for a test, for a 3-month test. And then the 3-month test is, for some of your sales processes, required, necessary, before we speak about the big final deal. Proof of concept is complete, or sometimes this is proof of concept initiated, but there has to be a milestone there. Is it initiated or is it complete? And then negotiation, the milestone here for me would be, it's another way of saying contract sent. But when you send a contract, you're living in this stage where you probably have to negotiate things. Sometimes it's not price, sometimes it's just something in the terms and conditions. And you're living within this stage until you finally sign the deal and the final stage is closed, won. Okay, so this is an example. What I'd like to do, just to dig deeper into the topic of sales process, imagine that we are clicking behind the qualification stage, the first one. The point is to see how granular, see the level of detail that a sales process requires. So let's click into qualification, and then we have this. I assume you can all see a flow chart, a workflow. Okay, this is the detail behind the qualification stage, it speaks about the outreach methodology. And for most of you, probably this text is tiny, so I'll just read it to you. So we have boxes and we have a diamond here and we have all kinds of arrows, right? So that's typically what a workflow looks like. And this is describing how am I going to reach out to that decision maker within that company that I'm going to target that fits the definition of my target client, okay? So this particular process, it employs text messages, it employs emails, it employs phone calls as well. And it's all just trying to accomplish sales stage 2, because this is the outreach stage, the qualification stage. So this begins over here on the left-hand side by sending a LinkedIn request, by adding someone on LinkedIn, and really small text here in parentheses. I don't know how many of you can read that. It says template number 1. So I have some kind of template, something I copy paste into the little LinkedIn invitation, which conveys some kind of message. And of course, the person has the option to add me or not add me as a contact on LinkedIn. Why is this the right solution? It's not necessarily the outreach methodology that all of you have to follow. It's just one example. You could have an outreach methodology which begins by an email address and you send an email, or it can begin with any other kind of media. The point is that you build this methodology and then it becomes the Bible. It becomes the rules for the entire sales process, for the entire sales team. It's the granular detail of what the sales process is like. People who do not follow this outreach methodology would be classified as non-compliant. Salespeople who are following the sales process would be classified as compliant. It's up to you what you do with that. So a salesperson who is not compliant versus one who is compliant. We're going to talk about documentation in a while, and when salespeople are non-compliant, I can already tell you it ruins the reporting that you can get out of a CRM, sadly. Okay, so then the diamond says, did they add me or did they not add me as a LinkedIn contact? If they did, then yes is pointing down into the green box. And basically the green box says, now send template number 2. So again, it's just a copy paste job where I have some longer, more detailed message. And I am always trying to schedule sales stage 2, the deeper conversation, the discovery meeting with the client. But what if they do not add me as a LinkedIn contact? Or what if they never react after I send template number 2? Then there is, I don't know how many of you can see the fine detail, but right to the right of the diamond, it says 2 days. If they don't add me, I am counting 2 business days, and then I'm attempting my first cold call on the phone. What is the objective of a cold call? To whisper the sales value proposition into the ear of that decision maker that I defined before. The box to the right of that, after a 2-day delay, there is my second phone attempt. That implies that during the first phone call, I only got voicemail, so that does not count as telling the value proposition to the decision maker. It's telling the value proposition to a machine. So that's not the decision maker, it's a machine. So if that happens, then I need a second phone attempt, but I space it out by 2 days. Let the person come back from the doctor's office or whatever, or the receptionist did not connect you during the first phone attempt. So again, you didn't have the chance to say the value proposition. There's a third phone attempt and a last and fourth phone attempt. Why? That's just the way this one's built. It has 4 cold calling attempts. The first 3 are separated by 2 days. The fourth and last one are separated by, the third and the fourth attempt are separated by 2 weeks. What's the rationale of 2 weeks? Let them come back from vacation. I don't know. So there's no right or wrong way to do this in terms of how many phone attempts, or whether no phone attempts, or whether more email attempts, or whatever. The point is that when you take your best educated guess on what the methodology should look like, then it becomes published and it becomes the rules for everyone. Okay, so the phone attempts, when they are successful, you do get the decision maker on the phone. They lead to this other green box, which again is here, it's a conversation. You're trying to schedule sales stage 2. The objective is always, if I'm on sales stage 1, the objective is not truly to sell the product, it's to accomplish the next sales stage. That helps salespeople to concentrate very nicely whenever they ask you, what do I do next? What do I do next? And you always answer the same way. The answer is, okay, what sales stage are you in? I'm in sales stage 2. What comes after 2? 3. Okay, that's the answer to your question. That's what you do next, sales stage 3. You answer the question enough you answer the question enough times in that way, and people learn to stop asking you. They just need to concentrate on what stage am I in right now. I don't need to accomplish sales stage 7 if I'm in sales stage 2. I need to just concentrate on accomplishing sales stage 3, and so on. Okay, so that is the level of detail. That's how granular it gets, sales processes. We had another sales stage called proposal. Let's click into that one and see what kind of detail there is behind proposal. Before we do that, we're skipping discovery meeting. What does that look like? It's not a flow chart anymore. It's not a workflow. It's more of an agenda because it's a meeting. So I don't have that slide, but we can discuss later if there are some questions. What's a good agenda for a discovery meeting? Sometimes there are some sales organizations that don't leave it just as an agenda. They have a whole script for the discovery meeting. I'm not a fan of a scripted discovery meeting, although for some business models, that must be the right solution. The reason I'm not a fan of a discovery meeting is because I always try to make this a sort of a living, breathing interaction between two individuals. So I bring in different kinds of tools for that, such as an agenda, part 1, part 2, part 3, which you establish and the client agrees, yeah, I like that agenda, or they can disagree and modify the agenda. And then you all know what you're working toward, the agenda for that discovery meeting. The other tool I bring into discovery meetings, as opposed to a script, is just a list of prefabricated questions called probing questions. Hard questions that I will ask during the discovery meeting to uncover the problem, the circumstances that the client is experiencing, because that's what's going to help me to put together a proper solution for them. So I prefer that to a script, but that's just me, and it has to do with, you know, the business model you're in. That will also determine. For now, I'm going to click into the detail of proposal. Okay, so this is it. Again, it's kind of a workflow, but different shape than the one we had in the outreach methodology, because this is not outreach methodology, this is follow-up methodology for this particular case. Again, is this the right or wrong way to follow up? It's a way to follow up, and it's published, and then you expect the sales team to be compliant, okay? So following up, it means you've already had a conversation. You're just trying to figure out at the end of the day, what do we do next? So again, I know this is small, but we have a box here that says proposal sent. So you sent a proposal through an email, for example, and from that moment, you can begin to count the time. Like before, when we had 2 days spaced between our cold calling attempts, this is another case where you count the time, where you could count the time if you want this level of granularity in your sales process. So proposal sent, just 2 to 4 hours later, you place a courtesy call. Your sales team will place a courtesy call. What do we mean by courtesy call? Well, first let's talk about the 2 to 4 hours. If you send your proposal at 4 in the afternoon, then the 2 to 4 hours isn't 8 o'clock at night. It's the next workday. Okay, so it's in the morning of the next workday. So the courtesy call, what is it? It's very soon to be calling after sending a proposal. No one's going to have a decision made 2 hours after you sent a proposal, but we do want to check a few things. did the email get there? Don't underestimate the power of junk filters. More and more every day, actually, I'm finding people I speak to all the time in my junk filter. So do not underestimate the importance of checking, hey, did you receive my quote? I emailed it to you yesterday. So you're hoping people say, oh, yeah, let me look. Yeah, it's here. So that's objective number 1 of the courtesy call. I'm reading down the bullets here. So check whether the prospect has received the quote. Check if any immediate questions can be addressed. So I've been speaking for a long time, you guys. Now I'm going to ask you a question. You're calling someone only 2 hours after you sent the proposal. If they have any immediate questions about the proposal, that sends you a signal, doesn't it? And that is something that we're looking for here. That's one of the hidden agendas of the courtesy call. What signal does it send us if someone has a couple of immediate questions just 2 to 4 hours after you sent an email? What signal is there?
That he is very interested in
That's
a
right.
proposal, and that he tracked it
Yeah.
in the first few hours.
Correct. That's how quickly they opened the email and probably read quickly through the proposal. That's a very important signal. It tells you how to operate, basically. It tells you how much to rely on that deal. If someone does not have immediate questions, well, then maybe your proposal went to junk filter and you already helped them to find that, right? So they couldn't have any immediate questions. So it doesn't mean they're not interested. But if someone has no immediate questions, it did mean that at least they were too busy to even open your proposal, and they could still be interested, but it's a very busy place. It's a very busy company, and the whole sales process will probably suffer for it. It'll be delayed for it. Things will take longer than they need to. As far as the hidden agenda goes, the courtesy call is also in order to schedule a first follow-up with the client. The point of the first follow-up, which is what I'm getting into now, the second set of bullet points. After the courtesy call is the first follow-up. The point is to read the proposal to the client, to have a meeting where you are making sure they understand everything in the proposal. So your proposals are always going to be text-based, like an email is text-based, and an attachment to an email is text-based. So it's written communication. Proposals they come in writing. They don't come in some kind of like Snapchat sort of message that just disappears after a few minutes, right? So basically, you want to make sure that the writing you put on the paper is perceived in the way that you meant it. A lot of times when you put something in writing, you mean A, and somehow they understand B. There's always a risk of a breakdown in communication, also when you're just speaking to someone, but especially when you text something. Like when you send a message on WhatsApp, and sometimes you write something which is supposed to be friendly or sarcastic, and someone reacts super offended. They just didn't get it from the text. That can happen in proposals too. So make sure that that you build yourself the chance to go through a quick follow-up meeting. Quick can become long if they have questions. That's great. If they have questions, then it becomes a longer conversation, but hold their hand. Take them through the proposal. No matter how obvious and simple your proposal is, make sure to do that. Hold their hand and explain the proposal to them. Then there's the hidden agenda of the first follow-up, which is the last bullet point. You need to ask them what and when. These are your operational questions all the time when you're trying to sell a product. What will you do with the offer, and when will that take place? So in other words, you guys, I'm going to let you do a little speaking right now. What is the point of asking what and when? The answer to what and when What is that called? What
Action
comes
items.
out of it? Actions. Let's call it next steps. What and when creates a next step? Obviously. What will happen next and when will it take place? That's called the next step. Every single time you speak to a client, it needs to end with what and when. So when you are cold calling, what and when? It's our discovery meeting and let's schedule it. Okay? When you finish a discovery meeting, what and when? What would you like to see us doing next and when should that take place? And then it sounds like, send us a proposal, please have it to us by next week. Okay, that's the next step. And then when a proposal is sent, we begin we're here now, we begin our follow-up methodology, and that is also going to end in what and when are you going to, what are you going to do with this proposal and when is it going to take place? And then you hear information. When you hear an answer that sounds like, and then I'll let you guys speak a little bit again. When someone tells you like, oh, Phil, leave the proposal with us, we'll get back to you. So that's an answer to what and when. Leave the proposal with us and we'll get back to you. On the scale of 1 to 10, how much do we like that answer?
2.
2, you don't completely hate it because they could come back to you. If they're telling the truth, leave it with us and we'll come back to you. Then that means they will come back to you. So, but we don't like that answer a lot. When we ask, what will you do with the offer now and when will it take place? And they say, Phil, leave it with us and we'll come back to you. We don't like that answer. A tactic that I would like to leave you with, teach you for selling your product is when you hear an answer that you don't like the answer, try not to show people you don't like the answer. Try to show people that you appreciate that they gave you an answer. Because leave it with us and we'll come back to you. They might be saying that out of complete honesty and goodwill. Maybe it's completely true. We will come back to you. So it's the very wrong moment to say, I don't like that answer. Okay? It's the moment to say, okay, thank you for that. But if you're not happy with the answer, ask another question. And always ask another question and another question until you are satisfied. And the questions, another tactic to teach you is eliminate all yes-no questions from your operations. Never ask a yes-no question. So yes-no questions are, will you, do you, can you, should I? None of that. Everything must be open-ended. What, when, how, who, which, all of those. Any question that forces them to say something different from yes or no. So please learn that tactic. It's like going to the gym and practicing and practicing and practicing until you finally get something done right. Like if you are in gymnastics, it takes a lot of practice until you finally do it right. Every yes-no question has an open-ended form, which might sound unreal right now, but when you finally put it into practice, you learn to ask questions. So you learn how to convert it into an open question. So for example, if you're tempted to ask someone, do you like my product? What is the open-ended form of do you like my product? Because do you like my product is a yes-no.
What do you think about my product?
What do you think about my product? How do you like my product? Good, good. When you ask, do you like my product? That is a doomed question. It is destined to fail because you're forcing a decision. So if someone likes your product 49%, but they dislike your product 51%, to that extent. They like it to the extent of 49%, but they dislike it to the extent of 51%. You're throwing away all of the 49% by asking them, do you like it? Because you're forcing them into a binary choice. And then the democracy wins. If they don't like it, to the extent of 51%, they have to tell you, no, I don't like your product. And then you might just get angry about the answer and walk out. Whereas if you ask them, how do you like my product? And if they like it 49%, they're going to say, you know, I like it somewhat, but not enough. And now you know what to work with, okay? And you would ask another question. Okay, tell me about the somewhat that you like, or tell me about the not enough that you like. And then people will say, well, what's not enough is this and that, or what is somewhat that I like is this and that. So that's how to handle sales, guys. You always have to create a conversation. Yes, no questions are conversation killers. It would depend completely on their generosity to tell you, I don't like it, but you know, you could fix this. That would be a lot to ask of a potential client. So you do the work. Don't be lazy. Ask them hard questions. Make sure they're all open-ended. Okay, guys, so sales process is a big deal. I realize I'm dumping most of the time into that, but we will still get to documentation. If there's something left to say about documentation, I'll cover it if it's okay next week. But we will get there. So just to finish up the sales process topic, we were talking about publishing your sales process so that then people know if they're compliant or not compliant. So here I've just kind of ripped a page out of a sales process handbook to show you the level of detail that you would want to give a sales team, okay? So this is a page, it's mostly text-based. It is just pure text here, but mixed between the text would be the workflow, the flow chart that we saw before. That would be what do you call it? An image inside inside between the text of the segment where it belongs. You would it would be an exhibit. That's what I was trying to say. It would be an exhibit placed in between. This is section 3.0. Assuming there's a section 4.0, you would have that somewhere. That image, that exhibit. You would have screenshots of the CRM as well. Things as simple as the save button. You know, you cut the screen and something they need to save, like a note. You would cut the picture of the screen where you put in a note, and then you put an arrow pointing to the save button. That kind of detail, that usually produces about a 20-page document when you have this density of text plus all the images and exhibits that a sales team would need. At the end of the day, you can measure salespeople for being compliant or non-compliant to your sales process. So section 3.0, what have I been saying in section 1 and 2? Other stuff. But then we get to the sales process. And it begins 3.1 by looking through LinkedIn for the profiles of the people you're looking for. If you look at the red text, we're looking either for sales directors or revenue directors or CMO. That's specific to each one of your business models. And what to do, 3.2, enter that information into the CRM. If we jump forward, now we're in section 9.0, deals. It tells people when to create a deal. A deal is something that we set up in a CRM. We'll talk more about that in the next segment today, the documentation segment, and so on. Just detail as to how to conduct themselves and how to use the CRM, which brings us to documentation. Okay, guys, so I'll pick up some speed, obviously, because we're running out of time, and I'll still say a few things about documentation and KPIs at the beginning of next week's session, because time is a little tight now for us. Probably it was a lot of information for you guys, the sales process. But if anything, I wanted to leave you with an impression of how serious it is, how granular it is. And there could be sales processes that make me look like an amateur. There could be sales processes that go much deeper into detail. Starting with things like, I challenge the idea of coming into a discovery meeting with a big script if you're working for Siemens and you're a salesperson, I can imagine things being super granular, super scripted, and I'm not the coach for that, basically, because I'm not the corporate sales coach. I'm the B2B coach for scale-ups and startups in the digital field, where we still want to keep it simple, even if that looked really heavy. That's still keeping it kind of simple. So any quick questions or comments about what we've seen so far before we jump into documentation? Okay, I don't hear anything, so I'll move on. Documentation and KPIs. What does this tell you guys? What do you think we're going to look at, considering the title here? What do you think we're going to talk about here? What are KPIs?
Key performance indicators.
Okay, that's what the letters mean. And then what does it mean in simple terms?
Conversions, conversions, conversions.
Okay, conversions. That means that we looked at sales stages, so that's useful for us to tie it to this. If someone is reaching out to clients in sales stage 1, and the objective is to schedule discovery meetings, then we can measure conversion there, right? So for 10 companies you reach out to, 3 got scheduled and you accomplished discovery meetings with them. So 30% conversion. Okay, so KPIs, guys, it's your statistics. It's your conversion figures from stage to stage. Basically, it's just measuring how we're doing. Documentation is the idea that the statistics can only run if we put data into the database, basically. So junk in, junk out. We've all heard that expression. Junk in, junk out means that you put bad data into something, you'll get junk reports. So documentation is up to the sales team. It begins by having a common platform, where a common database where everyone is entering information, and also everyone is entering it in the same way. So if one person is entering their success figures and their communication points with a potential client into the CRM in one way, a way that they've cooked up on their own, and someone's doing it their way, then the reporting will also be off because there's no common denominator. People are doing things their way. So the data could look different. To give you a quick example, the kinds of reports that you extract from a CRM platform, which is a great common platform for everyone to, for the whole sales process to run on. Sometimes you have some salespeople who are optimists versus pessimists, okay? And when we're measuring conversion from stage to stage, the point is we want to compare one salesperson to the other. That's one of the functions of the reporting. If you have an optimistic salesperson, they might put a deal way over at stage 5. And a pessimistic person will keep their deal at stage 2. They're not brave enough or bold enough yet to represent it as very advanced. Well, then all the reporting is totally ruined when everyone's just doing it their way, because it looks like there's very low conversions for the pessimistic guy and very high conversions for the optimistic guy. Not conversions to deal signed, but conversions from outreach to discovery meeting to the next thing to the next thing. And then we're not comparing apples to apples anymore. We're comparing oranges to oranges. A sales process comes in and it sets milestones, like we were saying before, that make it black and white for everyone whether I now qualify for this next sales stage. And it speaks to the point that no one's just doing their own thing. Okay, so that's one thing which is important, that documentation is going to keep it consistent, and the process and the rules that you set around documentation. Okay, so I'd like to talk really quickly about the role of a CRM platform. So in the interest of time, I'll skip asking you too many questions, but we've all heard of Salesforce.com, and many of us have heard of HubSpot, and some of us have heard of Pipedrive and Streak and other SaaS platforms, cloud-based platforms, which are CRMs. What is the purpose of a CRM? Roughly stated, it's just a database. It's a place where you contain contact names and contact information. You could copy paste emails. You could write down bullets of what you spoke about with someone during a phone call or during a face-to-face meeting or a teleconference meeting, as might be a discovery meeting, or also if you met someone in a trade show, that was also a meeting, and it's about putting all that information into some database. So the question I like to ask you guys, but in the interest of time, I won't wait for an answer, is can you do that on Excel? Yep, you can do that on Excel. You could have rows for each one of the companies and columns, and you eventually get to a column where it's my contact name and their phone number and their email, and then another column which is the first meeting I had with them and the second meeting. You could have all the columns in the world just to fill in emails and meetings that happened, okay? A CRM platform, however, the nice thing is the user interface. It's made for the situations and circumstances of everyday life as a salesperson. The next role that a CRM platform performs is that of task manager. So simply, you can configure a task in a calendar that exists inside your CRM, set it for 3 months in the future, and you could include notes there, such as call this guy, ask them what they will do with the contract, and when will they take that action. So you're prompting yourself to take an action and what to say in the future, which is nice. The user interface is made for that. My question to you is, could you do that on Excel? Well, maybe if you're really good at Excel, you could do that. But most likely, now we're talking Excel for the database, and then your Google Calendar for having tasks in the future. So now you have two tools. Another thing that the CRM platform does for you is reporting. So there is a family of reports called the dashboards. And then there is the most important report called the pipeline report. So again, in the interest of time, not asking you guys a bunch of questions, I would ask you, what's a pipeline? So the raw definition of a pipeline is it's a list of the companies you are actually dealing with right now. Okay, so there's a lot to say about dealing with right now. So a pipeline report, when it's done correctly, it only includes the conversations that are living, the dealings that are actually have a next step to them. Many times your pipeline reports can get really, really big because you decide to park a lot of dead deals. So a lot of conversations that you've had with clients, but you don't have the heart, or you don't like the optics, the visual of setting a deal to lost. And you lie to yourself a lot that there is a future left with a particular client who kind of already, they didn't say no, but you'll relate to this because we leave deals on the pipeline where we never got an answer, where people just disappeared. They never told us no, but we keep following up and following up and following up, and we keep thinking that we're still dealing with this client, but then you have to be honest with yourself. You're not dealing with this client anymore. There have to be rules about sending people a breakup email that basically says, hey, I have spent the last 2 weeks trying to follow up with you, As a reminder, we agreed that we would have a discussion to go through the details of the proposal. We had an appointment for that. Please be advised that I am now going to suspend my follow-up with you, but please make sure to come back to me when this is once again a priority topic for you. So you need to learn to lose deals, but you also have to advise the client, I'm dumping you because I haven't heard back from you. Be advised that I'm not going to be reminding you all the time, as you probably have noticed that I have been reminding you all the time. This slide is not about the breakup email, but since I'm speaking about this, about learning to lose deals and advise people that you're not going to follow up anymore, that's important because some people have just been too busy. And when they finally know that you're going to stop following up, that's when they know, okay, that's my last chance. I need to get on the ball. And you, in my experience, you get answers to about 1 out of 3 breakup emails that you send, and you get it real fast. And people usually say, oh, I've been really, really busy. It doesn't mean their reply solves the problem. It just shows you that there is still interest. You would try to build a next step based on that reply. But if there's no next step agreed between you and a potential client, you need to remove those deals from the pipeline because they're just an illusion that we have a next step. Let's talk about goodwill. People may have a lot of goodwill towards your product and your company. But if there's no next step agreed between you and the client, that deal is not alive. Let's jump back to Task Manager. Creating tasks for reaching out to someone in the future. You can make all the tasks you want to reach back to companies where there's goodwill towards you, but it doesn't mean there has to be a deal existing in your pipeline. So that's a big deal for me, and which is why I'm saying so much about it. Now, I'd like to, before turning into just the question and answer phase of the conversation, I would like to draw something for you really quickly to illustrate what a dashboard is. Okay, so a dashboard is just, okay, why is this? I think I clicked on the wrong thing. Hang on. Okay, so a dashboard, yeah, much better. So a dashboard is just a report. It's just information on a report. You decide how you want to illustrate the information in the report. So dashboards actually very often can be depicted as something like this. So what does this look like, you guys? Can anyone tell me what this looks like roughly?
A clock.
Okay, it looks like a clock.
Speed meter.
Whoops. It may look like a speedometer. So imagine that it's 10 kilometers and then 20 kilometers and then 30 and 40 and 50 kilometers, right? But this can also represent a statistic, okay? So it could represent deals, okay? And another thing I'm gonna do here is just pretend this is shaded, okay? Pretend this is shaded, so it's gray, everything else is not, okay? And so it tells us that we are at 5 deals, okay? We have signed 5 deals this quarter or this month, okay? So everything is shaded after 7. What do you think that means about 7? What might 7 be when everything else is shaded beyond that?
How much we have to,
Yeah,
how much deals we have
that's
to
right.
have by the
7,
end of the month.
correct. 7 is the target. That means that 9, 8, and 9, and 10 is called what? Overperformance. Okay, so hitting the target is this, beating the target is this, and short of the target is this. Okay, that's usually what dashboard reports look like. So it is it states a goal and it shows you where you are. It could be represented with bars. Doesn't have to be a dial like this one. Sometimes you just need to pay extra to have this dial report. And without paying extra to the CRM platform, you can do bars. And that's okay. It could still be a bar of 5 and the goal can still be 7. That's all okay. So there could be another. I mentioned that the dashboard is a family of reports, dashboard reports. There could be another dial sitting to the left of this, and that one is called proposals. And that could also have a target. Maybe the target is 15 proposals, okay? And the dial could be at 13 proposals right now. These are proposals sent, okay? So that's sitting to the left. And if this month we sent 15 proposals and we signed 5 deals, we can draw a relationship between those two, can't we? So 5 came out of 15. What percentage conversion is that?
%30.
Right, it's a third, okay? So now let me illustrate something further. So the first thing we saw was what a dashboard report looks like, one of them. And then we already created a scenario where there would be one to the left, which is proposals sent. To the left of that would be discovery meetings held. And to the left of that would be the very beginning of the funnel. So outreach, how many companies did we reach out to? And we can measure conversion all the way from outreach to deals. We could measure conversion, we could jump some stages and measure conversion from outreach to deals. We could measure conversion just from neighboring stages, so from proposal sent to deals. We could measure conversion from outreach to discovery meetings held. Let's add another layer to that. This report we see here could be deals signed by Jimmy. And then we have the full set of dials for Kim. And so these could focus actually just on the performance of individual salespeople. So Jimmy is one, and then Kim is another one. And now we can draw comparisons across those rows. So if Jimmy has really high conversion from proposal to deals, and Kim has lower conversion from proposals to deals, then that helps us to identify an area where we could coach Kim, right? Because once there's a proposal in someone's hand, okay, we're gonna assume it's a good proposal. Then the conversion from proposal sent to deal closed, that speaks to one particular skill set. We're assuming both proposals are good, the ones that Kim sends and the ones that Jimmy sends. But if Jimmy has a higher conversion from proposal sent to deal closed, then what skill set is that probably pointing toward?
Better negotiation skills?
Yeah, possibly. Better negotiation skills, which are probably just listening very closely and taking quick action based on what the client is telling you, okay? Or it could also be having more courage to apply the brakes, you know, like what we spoke about before. So you would explore to see where Kim needs to improve, okay? Now, I'll answer this question for myself. If you're looking at the conversion from outreach to discovery meeting held, the skill set you are probably looking at there is clear communication skills, because someone would have to say, yes, I'd like to have the discovery meeting with you based on how clearly you express the value proposition. So those are different skill sets that you would focus on depending on who seems to be performing below standard. Okay, so that's the nice thing about the dashboard reports. Pipeline report, that's another type of report altogether. So if I clear all my drawings, a very traditional way to represent the pipeline report There's a more modern way to view a pipeline report. In fact, most modern CRMs are defaulted to the more modern way to represent a pipeline report. This is the more traditional, older way to represent a pipeline report. At the end of the day, it's the same data, okay? But the old school pipeline report, let me just, we can see it's a spreadsheet, okay? And let me just fill in some values here, okay? And let's pretend this is, you can see that I have trouble writing this, right? I don't have any modern technology other than my trackpad and my finger. Okay, so, ooh, this one's hard to write. Ooh, okay, so what names do we see here on the left? Can anyone read them back to me?
Apple, IBM, and Lenovo.
Lenovo, okay, I'm glad you could read that last one. Okay, so the traditional pipeline report. These rows are companies, these columns are values. This value, for example, could be the name of the contact person you have at Apple. This could be the telephone number for that person. Where the values in the columns get to be really useful is this D, imagine that is closing date, the date you expect to close a deal with Apple. A is the amount, so the value of the deal you expect to close with Apple, like $10,000, for example. And then IBM could be 30,000, and Lenovo could be 5,000. And then NS, this means next step. So it's a statement that basically says the client has agreed to contact me the day after their board meeting where they're going to discuss the offer that I sent. Or client is expecting me to produce a proposal for them before the end of June, you know, something like that. So those are next steps that you have in fact agreed with the client. If I asked the client without your permission, if I called the client and asked them, hey, I'm really glad that you're dealing with Luca. By the way, out of curiosity, what have you agreed to do next with Luca? Then Apple, IBM, and Lenovo would tell me the same thing that's written in this pipeline report. They would say, oh yeah, you know, I'm waiting for Luca to get me a proposal. I asked him to have it before the end of June. So if that is the voice of the client, that's what needs to go into the next step, okay? So that is what a pipeline report looks like. The traditional one. The modern one is made as columns only, and the columns contain cards. And the cards basically just flash the same kind of information, okay? What is the use of this pipeline report? Well, then that brings us to, let me see, I need to, okay, great. That brings us to the last thing. The role of a CRM platform is to play an organizational part as well. So the question we asked before, how many tools do we need now? For database, task manager, and reporting, probably 3 different tools. Task manager, your Google Calendar. Database, Excel. Reporting, maybe some dashboard app. There's plenty of them out there, right? But everything is scattered as opposed to having it all in the same place. And then you add another layer to that. The CRM plays an organizational role, meaning that, for example, when you have a weekly internal sales meeting with the sales team, it's a matter of visualizing all these reports, the pipeline and the dashboard, and then it can take center stage in making and conducting a conversation during that sales meeting. There would be no director in the sales meeting other than the CRM and the reports that are contained inside. Just to mention one more thing, just to get into our question and answer phase, the pipeline report, this is where you really take the pulse. It's checking the health of the sales effort, because you could have an investor, for example, call you and ask you, hey, Phil, what's the value of the deals you expect to close in Q2 of this year? So between now and the end of June. The way to answer that question, you guys, is to take the expected close date, the D here, and isolate only the deals that are expected to close before the end of June, so still Q2, and multiply that by the amount of that deal. And you wouldn't have to tell the investor, let me call you tomorrow. You would just tell the investor, oh, if you have 2 minutes, let me just click on the CRM and filter the dates that are closing this quarter and take the amount. And okay, answer is we expect to close $35,000 in new deals this quarter. Why do you ask? Okay, so the beauty of it is that all of this works together if your salespeople are putting good information into the database, into the CRM platform, and everyone is entering it in the same syntax, in the same way. And for that, you need a pretty strict sales process, and people need to be complying with that sales process. Okay, so today, the lesson for today was really heavy because it's a lot of information. You may agree. Tell me if it wasn't. Tell me if this was too light and too simple and too easy as well. But basically, even if it's a very simple message for you, an obvious message, you didn't need to come to this meeting to hear it. My question to you is, are you living it? And that's probably the question that hurts, because you must live this. Otherwise, you're just fooling yourself that you have control over the sales process, that you can check the health of the sales effort. Okay, so on that note, which is kind of grave, I'll turn it over to you guys. Any questions or any comments or disagreements that you would like to express right now?
Okay, guys, who has questions, just unmute yourself and start talking, or if you are not available to talk, just type on the chat and we will read.
Okay, Phil, I wanted to ask you, when you talked about the negotiation stage, and when the client says like, yeah, that sounds cool. We will come back to you like in 2 weeks or something like that.
Right.
We understood that is not that good of an answer. And you said like, thank them for the answer and then ask deeper questions. I wanted to ask you like, what would be some kind of questions that you should ask in this situation?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very good one. Okay, so leave it with us and we will come back to you in 2 weeks. That's a lot better than the one I said. It's leave it with us and we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you in 2 weeks. That's a lot more substance. And the obvious, I won't say obvious, but in English, you have an expression, it begs the question. That means that that question, it just kind of forces the next question, because what's going to happen between now and 2 weeks, right? If their answer is leave it with us, we'll follow up with you in 2 weeks, then thank you for that information. That's very kind of you to say. Out of curiosity, what will be happening between now and 2 weeks? Because it's directly related. I'm curious to know what will happen between now and 2 weeks. We'll come back to you in 2 weeks sounds pretty good, because at that moment you can say, okay, let's schedule that. Let's schedule a discussion 2 weeks from now. But you may decide it's not enough for you. It's still, maybe from experience, you know, that's just too risky not to investigate that further. So I would ask, out of curiosity, what will be happening between now and 2 weeks? And then the point of that question is to see if there was substance. If they can't answer with substance, that might suggest that it was just a throwaway answer. Throwaway answer means just something to get you off the phone. And how is that valuable? It is. It's always valuable for us to know is this worth investing a lot of effort into? And the signals people give you, we spoke about signal also when we sent the proposal and someone already had questions when I called them 2 hours later. That's a signal. If someone says, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and I ask, what will be happening between now and 2 weeks, and there's no substance to that, that sends me a signal. But if the answer is specific, like, oh, you know, that's when we have our board meeting every 2 weeks, and I'm highly motivated to express your, to introduce your solution in that meeting. That's a great answer also. We appreciate it. That begs another question, honestly. The question I have at that moment is, in the vulgar form is, okay, so what power do you have? And will these people even listen to you? Are you just a bug on the wall? And you're going to say, oh, I'd like to talk about something. And then someone says, no, forget it. We'll talk about that next week. And the person goes like, okay, you want to know if that's the kind of person. How do we ask that question in a diplomatic way? So the question you hear inside your soul, that's the question you need to ask. So it doesn't sound good to me that he's going to bring it up in a meeting. So I would honestly try to ask the question I have in my mind in the most diplomatic way. Diplomatic doesn't mean indirectly. Diplomatic just means directly, but don't make them feel like they don't count. My question at that moment, and I'm just kind of thinking as I'm speaking, okay, so if you could tell me what would the decision process look like when you have presented the solution in that meeting? And then they might say, you know, the decision is really in the hands of blah, blah, blah. And then I would ask, okay, what can I do to give that person the kind of understanding that you have? You know, you just want to investigate the situation until you feel you have uncovered it. What happens when you uncover it is you can either make a proposal on how to improve that situation, or if you can't make a proposal, there's really nothing you can do to go stand in front of that decision maker to give them an understanding as well as the understanding that, as good as the understanding that your contact person has. Well, again, that might just send you a signal. You might ask that person, okay, if you don't mind me asking, what are the chances they will let you bring up my my solution in that meeting? And it's a direct question, but it's as diplomatically as I can ask it, because I picture this thing where they run out of time and he didn't have time to talk about my my solution. So I would just ask that very directly. It's okay. I would be looking for someone to say, you know, about half of the time we do have the chance to say what we want to say. That person doesn't even need to take that personally. They could just be speaking about the typical meeting. Not everyone gets to say what they want. So if someone tells me there's a 50-50 chance, I have another question. I'm always saying, okay, thank you for telling me. That's good to know. Out of curiosity, what do you think is the next step in case you are falling on the wrong side of the 50-50 and there's no time and you don't get to say what you're interested in saying? Uncover it and uncover it and uncover it. You can be satisfied when you just know the whole panorama. When you know the whole panorama, like I said before, maybe you can make a case to see how it can be improved. So in this case, maybe, and I'm just imagining a whole world, obviously, trying to think the scenario through. It could go in a different direction, of course. But what if there's a 50-50 chance, right? That kind of gives me the power to say, okay, let's agree that you go to the meeting, but let's also agree on the backup plan if you don't get a chance to speak about it. Maybe you can make something out of that, you know, like a scheduled meeting, me, my contact person, and the decision maker. But let's let you see if you can get the point across during the board meeting. If not, can we agree to that? And so uncover until you can make a decent proposition. So that's where my imagination takes me based on your question.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Okay, if there is no more questions, I would like to thank, first of all, Phil for his time.
And something I want to do real quickly is
Yeah.
just to advertise next week's meeting, because that's the most exciting one in the series. That's when we're going to look at outreach methodology, not the sales process version, but the actual execution of it. We're going to look at how to place cold calls, and that's always a lot of fun. So make sure that you come to that section, or promote it. Tell people the best session is still coming next week.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Thank you all for participating. As I already mentioned on the beginning, we will send you the recording of this session. Also, since some of you are new, missed the first one, we will send also the recording of the first one, so you can have the whole picture prior to the third session, which will happen in next Tuesday. So I would like to thank you in front of the Start Center, B&H Founders Club, and Science and Technology Park Belgrade, as well as in front of the Swiss EP program. So see you next Tuesday and keep in touch.
Okay, everyone. Great speaking to you. Have a good week.